The buzz around Late Night Live had been building for days. It wasn't just another episode of the talk show. This was going to be a spectacle, and everyone knew it. The producers had pulled out all the stops, teasing fans with cryptic promos that hinted at drama, tension, and unforgettable moments. At the center of it all were two of Hollywood's most beloved figures, Keanu Reeves and Sandra Bullock. Known not only for their incredible talent but also for their humility and charm, the duo had rarely appeared together since their iconic roles in Speed decades earlier. This made the announcement of their joint appearance on the show even more exciting. For weeks, social media feeds were flooded with fan theories. Some speculated they'd finally address long-standing rumors about their friendship or perhaps hint at working together again. Others wondered if Keanu would open up about his famously private life, while Sandra might share insights into juggling motherhood and her thriving career. Whatever the case, millions of viewers worldwide were glued to their screens, eagerly awaiting what promised to be one of the biggest interviews of the year. But there was something else brewing behind the scenes, something darker. Rumors began swirling among industry insiders about the host's intentions. Known for his sharp tongue and penchant for provoking guests, he wasn't exactly famous for playing nice. In fact, some past episodes had left celebrities visibly shaken, prompting public apologies and heated debates online. His style was polarizing. Some loved his boldness while others criticized him for crossing lines. And now, whispers suggested he planned to push Keanu and Sandra harder than ever before. Backstage, the atmosphere was charged with nervous energy. Staff members scurried around making last-minute adjustments to lighting and sound equipment, while assistants double-checked microphones and cue cards. Meanwhile, Keanu and Sandra sat quietly in separate green rooms, preparing themselves mentally for the evening ahead. Though neither seemed outwardly anxious, those close to them noticed subtle signs of unease. Keanu scrolled through his phone, occasionally glancing at headlines speculating about the interview. Sandra paced slowly, rehearsing answers to potential questions under her breath. Both actors understood the stakes. They weren't just representing themselves tonight, but also their legacies as respected figures in Hollywood. As the clock ticked closer to showtime, the studio filled with an electric energy. Fans packed the audience section, many holding handmade signs proclaiming their love for Keanu and Sandra. Camera operators adjusted their angles, producers gave final pep talks to crew members, and the band played upbeat tunes to warm up the crowd. When the opening theme music blared through the speakers, the room erupted into cheers. The stage lights dimmed, and the camera panned to the host, who greeted the audience with his signature grin. "Ladies and gentlemen," he boomed, "tonight we have two legends joining us, Keanu Reeves and Sandra Bullock." When Keanu and Sandra finally stepped onto the stage, the applause was deafening. Dressed casually yet impeccably, they waved to the cheering crowd with genuine smiles. Keanu wore his trademark black leather jacket, exuding quiet confidence, while Sandra looked radiant in a sleek dress, her warmth instantly putting people at ease. They took their seats on the plush couches opposite the host, exchanging quick, reassuring glances. For a brief moment, everything felt normal. But beneath the surface, tension lingered like a storm cloud waiting to burst. The host kicked things off with lighthearted banter, praising Keanu's action-packed films and Sandra's romantic comedies. He joked about how their chemistry and Speed had made audiences fall in love with them both. For a few minutes, the conversation flowed smoothly, and the audience relaxed, laughing along with the trio. However, seasoned viewers could sense a shift coming. The host's tone gradually sharpened, his jokes becoming edgier. What started as playful teasing soon veered toward uncomfortable territory. "You know, Keanu," the host said, leaning forward with a smirk, "people always say you're such a mysterious guy. Is that true? Or are you just boring?" The comment drew scattered laughter from the audience, though it sounded forced. Keanu blinked once, unfazed, before responding with a polite chuckle. "I guess I'll let you decide," he replied smoothly, his voice calm but firm. Sensing an opportunity, the host turned to Sandra next. "And Sandra," he continued, raising an eyebrow, "how do you feel about being called a rom-com queen? Do you ever wish you could break free from that label?" Sandra tilted her head slightly, her smile unwavering. Well, she said, choosing her words carefully. Labels can be tricky, can't they? But I've always believed in doing work that makes me happy and hopefully entertains others too. Her response earned polite applause, but the host wasn't satisfied. He leaned back in his chair, adopting a mock thoughtful expression. Entertains others, or just keeps things safe, he quipped, drawing a few hesitant laughs from the audience. By now, it was clear where this was heading. The initial charm had worn thin, replaced by a growing sense of unease. Despite the mounting pressure, Keanu and Sandra remained composed. Their body language spoke volumes. They weren't intimidated, nor were they eager to engage in verbal sparring. Instead, they radiated a quiet strength, silently daring the host to keep pushing. Little did anyone know, this was only the beginning. As the first commercial break approached, the audience exchanged curious glances, wondering how far the host would go, and how Keanu and Sandra would respond. One thing was certain: whatever happened next, it would leave a lasting impression. The host's tone took a sharp turn after the first commercial break. What had started as playful banter now felt like a calculated attempt to rattle Keanu and Sandra. The audience, still buzzing from their entrance, began to grow uneasy as the questions grew more pointed. "Let's talk about your image, Keanu," the host said with a smirk, leaning forward in his chair. "You've been called emotionally unavailable. Is that fair? Or are you just boring?" His voice carried a mix of mockery and challenge, and the room fell silent for a moment. Keanu didn't flinch. He sat perfectly still, his hands resting on his knees, his expression calm but unreadable. After a brief pause, he responded with a soft chuckle. "I think people project what they want onto others," he said, his voice steady. "For me, I've always tried to keep things simple, to focus on the work and let it speak for itself." His answer was polite but firm, leaving little room for the host to push further. Still, the host wasn't ready to back down. Turning to Sandra, he adopted a mock-concerned tone. "And you, Sandra," he began, raising an eyebrow. "You've done so many romantic comedies over the years. Don't you ever get tired of playing the same roles? Or is this just the safest path for you?" The audience shifted uncomfortably in their seats. A few scattered laughs rippled through the crowd, but they sounded awkward, unsure whether to take the comment as a joke or an insult. Sandra crossed her legs casually, her smile unwavering. She tilted her head slightly, studying the host with a look that seemed equal parts amusement and curiosity. "You know," she said, her voice smooth and measured, "I've always believed in choosing roles that resonate with me. If people find joy in those stories, then I feel like I've done my job." Her response was gracious but deliberate, subtly challenging the host's insinuation that she lacked depth or ambition. The host pressed on, undeterred. "But isn't it risky to stay in one lane?" he asked, his tone dripping with skepticism. "A lot of actors try to reinvent themselves, take on grittier roles, darker characters. Do you ever worry about being typecast?" Sandra leaned back slightly, her posture relaxed but confident. "I think every role has its own challenges," she replied, her eyes locking with his. "Whether it's comedy or drama, the goal is always to connect with the audience. And honestly, I don't think there's anything wrong with making people smile." By now, the tension in the room was palpable. The audience, initially excited for a fun evening, found themselves caught between discomfort and fascination. Some viewers exchanged uneasy glances while others whispered to their neighbors, speculating about where this was headed. The host, sensing resistance from his guests, decided to crank up the pressure even more. "Keanu," he said abruptly, turning back to the actor, "you've been in the industry for decades, yet you rarely open up about your personal life. Why is that? Are you hiding something? Or do you just not trust people?" This time, the audience gasped audibly. Even the crew behind the cameras exchanged nervous looks, unsure if the host had gone too far. Keanu, however, remained unfazed. He leaned forward slightly, his dark eyes meeting the host's with quiet intensity. "I think everyone has a right to privacy," he said simply. My life isn't really anyone else's business unless I choose to share it. And honestly, I'd rather focus on the work than the gossip. His words were calm but carried a weight that silenced the room. For a moment, even the host seemed taken aback by the sincerity in Keanu's voice. Undeterred, the host attempted to pivot to another topic, hoping to regain control of the conversation. "What about your friendship?" he asked, gesturing between Keanu and Sandra. "You two have known each other for years, right? Ever think about working together again? Or is there bad blood?" The question hung in the air, heavy with implication. Sandra raised an eyebrow, clearly unimpressed. "Bad blood?" she echoed, her tone laced with disbelief. "That's quite the assumption. We've always had mutual respect for each other, both personally and professionally. As for working together again, well, never say never." The audience erupted into applause, clearly siding with Sandra and Keanu. Their support seemed to embolden the pair, who exchanged a quick glance before turning their attention back to the host. Sensing that his attempts to provoke them weren't landing as intended, the host tried one last jab. "So, what's next for you two?" he asked, his tone tinged with sarcasm. "More action movies for Keanu? Another rom-com for Sandra? Anything exciting?" Keanu leaned back in his seat, his expression thoughtful. "I think excitement means different things to different people," he said, his voice carrying a hint of wisdom. "For me, it's about finding projects that challenge me creatively and connect with audiences emotionally. Whether it's action or drama, the goal is always the same: to tell a story worth telling." Sandra nodded in agreement, adding, "And for me, it's about staying true to who I am. If I can bring a little light into someone's day, then I feel like I've succeeded." The host opened his mouth to respond, but the audience interrupted him with thunderous applause. It was clear that Keanu and Sandra had struck a chord with their authenticity and grace under pressure. The energy in the room shifted noticeably, with the crowd now rallying behind the actors rather than the confrontational host. Realizing he was losing ground, the host forced a laugh and moved on to a lighter topic, though the damage was already done. As the segment continued, the audience couldn't help but admire how Keanu and Sandra handled the situation. They hadn't risen to the bait or allowed themselves to be drawn into unnecessary conflict. Instead, they maintained their composure, responding with dignity and poise. Their ability to navigate the host's provocations without losing their cool left a lasting impression, not just on the live audience but on viewers watching at home as well. Little did anyone know, the best was yet to come. The host's attempts to provoke Keanu and Sandra were starting to feel like a game of chess. He kept throwing out sharp, loaded questions, expecting them to stumble or react defensively. But instead of falling into his trap, the two actors sat calmly, their expressions giving nothing away. It was clear they weren't going to let him dictate the tone of the interview. And then, something unexpected happened. Keanu decided it was time to take control. "You know," Keanu said suddenly, interrupting the host mid-question. His voice was soft but firm, cutting through the tension in the room like a knife. "I've spent my whole life trying to bring people joy through storytelling. Whether it's through action movies, dramas, or even quieter roles, the goal has always been the same: to connect with others." He paused for a moment, letting his words sink in. Then, with a slight smile, he added, "If you're looking for drama tonight, maybe we should just make this about you." The audience erupted into laughter, clapping enthusiastically. The comment was clever, subtle, yet unmistakably pointed. For the first time that evening, the host seemed caught off guard. He forced a grin, trying to brush it off as a joke, but there was no mistaking the flicker of discomfort in his eyes. Sensing an opening, Sandra leaned forward slightly, her own smile widening. "It's funny," she chimed in, her tone light but deliberate, "because I don't think anyone here came to watch us tear each other down. We're here to celebrate movies, not ego trips." Her words hit the mark, drawing another round of applause from the audience. The energy in the room shifted dramatically. What had started as a tense confrontation was now transforming into something entirely different. The host, who had clearly planned to dominate the conversation, found himself on the defensive, Realizing they had seized the momentum, Keanu and Sandra took the opportunity to steer the discussion in a more meaningful direction. They began sharing personal stories about their friendship, reminiscing about their time working together on Speed. Keanu recalled how nervous he'd been during filming, unsure if he could live up to expectations. Sandra was so supportive back then, he said warmly. She helped me relax and focus on the work. That kind of bond stays with you. Sandra nodded, adding her own memories. We were both young and figuring things out, she said, her voice tinged with nostalgia. But there was always this mutual respect between us. Even after all these years, I still admire Keanu's dedication to his craft and his kindness. The sincerity in her words resonated deeply with the audience, many of whom murmured in agreement or wiped away tears. As the conversation unfolded, the host tried to interject several times, attempting to steer things back toward controversy. But every time he opened his mouth, the audience drowned him out with cheers and applause. It was as though they had collectively decided whose side they were on, and it wasn't his. Frustrated but unwilling to admit defeat, he resorted to sarcastic remarks, hoping to regain some ground. Oh, how touching, he muttered under his breath, rolling his eyes. But rather than rising to the bait, Keanu and Sandra simply ignored him, continuing their heartfelt exchange as if he weren't even there. At one point, Sandra turned directly to the camera, addressing the millions of viewers at home. I think we all have moments when life feels overwhelming, she said, her voice gentle but powerful. For me, acting has always been a way to process those emotions, to find strength and hope, even in difficult times. If my work can do that for someone else, then it's all worth it. Her words struck a chord with the audience, many of whom nodded along or whispered to their neighbors about how relatable her message felt. Keanu followed up with a reflection of his own. I've lost a lot of people I love over the years, he admitted, his voice steady but filled with emotion. And sometimes it feels like the world is moving too fast. But art, whether it's film, music, or anything else, has this incredible power to slow things down, to remind us what really matters. The audience listened intently, hanging on every word. Gone was the earlier tension. In its place was a profound sense of connection and understanding. Even the host seemed momentarily subdued, unable to match the authenticity of what was unfolding before him. For all his attempts to stir up conflict, he couldn't compete with the genuine warmth and vulnerability Keanu and Sandra brought to the table. Their willingness to share their struggles and triumphs created a rare moment of human connection, one that transcended the superficial nature of most talk show interviews. As the segment neared its halfway point, the atmosphere in the studio had transformed completely. The audience was fully invested, cheering loudly whenever the host tried to interrupt or derail the conversation. Instead of focusing on trivial controversies, they were witnessing something far more valuable. Two talented individuals using their platform to inspire and uplift. Keanu and Sandra had not only deflected the host's provocations, they had turned the entire narrative around, leaving everyone in awe of their grace and resilience. By the time the next commercial break rolled around, it was clear that the tide had turned decisively in favor of Keanu and Sandra. The host, once confident and commanding, now looked increasingly flustered, struggling to reclaim the spotlight. Meanwhile, the audience couldn't get enough of the duo, chanting their names and applauding wildly as the cameras cut away. Little did anyone know the best was yet to come, and the final act would leave an indelible mark on everyone watching. The momentum had shifted irreversibly in favor of Keanu and Sandra. The audience, now firmly on their side, responded with thunderous applause every time the host tried to interject or steer the conversation back toward controversy. It was as if the room itself had turned into a fortress of support for the two actors, shielding them from any further attempts at provocation. Sensing this shift, Keanu and Sandra leaned into the moment, taking full control of the narrative and turning the interview into something far more meaningful than anyone had anticipated. Sandra, ever the quick thinker, decided it was time to confront the elephant in the room head-on. With a sly smile, she turned to the host and said, I have to ask, why do you feel the need to pick fights with your guests? Are ratings really that bad? Her tone was playful but carried an unmistakable edge. The audience erupted into laughter, some people clapping so hard they nearly fell out of their seats. The host, caught completely off guard, forced a nervous chuckle and stammered something about keeping things entertaining. But his usual bravado was crumbling. Under the weight of Sandra's pointed question, Keanu seized the opportunity to drive the point home. Leaning forward slightly, he looked directly at the host and said, "There's enough cruelty in the world. Why not use this platform to lift people up instead?" His voice was calm but firm, each word landing like a quiet yet powerful punch. The simplicity of his statement struck a chord with everyone in the room, and likely millions watching at home. The audience broke into spontaneous applause again, their cheers echoing through the studio. For a brief moment, the host seemed genuinely flustered, his earlier confidence replaced by an awkward fidgeting. Realizing they had the upper hand, Keanu and Sandra continued to redirect the conversation in ways that highlighted their values and experiences. They shared stories about overcoming challenges in their careers and personal lives, offering glimpses into the resilience that had made them such enduring figures in Hollywood. Sandra spoke candidly about balancing motherhood with her demanding schedule, describing how she learned to prioritize what truly mattered. "It's not always easy," she admitted, her voice soft but steady. "But I've found that being honest with yourself and with others is the key to staying grounded." Keanu nodded in agreement, adding his own reflections on navigating loss and grief. "When you lose someone you love, it changes you," he said quietly. "But it also teaches you to appreciate the people who are still here, to cherish the moments you have with them." His words hung in the air, resonating deeply with the audience. Many viewers could be seen nodding along, some wiping away tears as they connected with the raw honesty of his message. Even the host, who had spent much of the evening trying to provoke conflict, seemed momentarily moved by the sincerity of Keanu's remarks. As the segment progressed, the dynamic between the three participants became increasingly lopsided. The monarch host, once the dominant force in the room, now struggled to keep up with the grace and poise displayed by Keanu and Sandra. Every attempt he made to regain control only seemed to highlight his growing discomfort. At one point, he tried to pivot, back to a controversial topic, asking Keanu about rumors surrounding his private life. But before he could finish the question, Keanu cut him off with a polite but firm response. "I think people deserve privacy, even in this line of work. My focus is on the art, not the gossip." The audience cheered loudly, clearly siding with Keanu's stance. Encouraged by the overwhelming support, Sandra chimed in with a clever remark of her own. "Maybe we should start a new trend," she suggested, her eyes twinkling mischievously. "Instead of digging for dirt, let's celebrate kindness. Imagine how different the world might feel if we all did that." Her suggestion drew another wave of applause, with some audience members chanting, "Kindness matters." The energy in the room was electric, a stark contrast to the tension that had dominated earlier in the show. By now, the host was visibly sweating under the spotlight. His rehearsed quips and barbed comments felt hollow compared to the authenticity radiating from Keanu and Sandra. Desperate to salvage the situation, he attempted one last jab, questioning whether their success was due to talent or simply good timing. But rather than taking offense, Sandra laughed it off with a shrug. "Good timing helps," she joked, eliciting more laughter from the crowd. Then, adopting a more serious tone, she added, "But I think success comes down to hard work, perseverance, and believing in yourself even when others don't." The audience roared in approval, their admiration for Sandra and Keanu reaching new heights. It was clear that the duo had not only deflected the host's provocations, but had transformed the entire tone of the interview. Where there had been tension, there was now warmth. Where there had been confrontation, there was now connection. And where there had been negativity, there was now inspiration. As the segment approached its final stretch, the host made one last-ditch effort to assert himself, asking a vague question about future projects. But Keanu and Sandra handled it, with the same elegance they'd shown throughout the evening. "Whatever comes next," Keanu said with a thoughtful smile, "I hope it brings people joy. That's what storytelling is all about." Sandra echoed his sentiment, adding, "And if it makes someone smile, or gives them hope, then I'll consider it a win." The audience erupted into applause once again, their enthusiasm reaching a fever pitch. By the time the cameras cut to commercial, the outcome was undeniable. Keanu and Sandra had turned what could have been a disastrous interview into a masterclass in grace under pressure. Their ability to rise above negativity and focus on positivity had left an indelible mark, not just on the live audience but on viewers around the world. As the show prepared to wrap up, the stage was set for one final, unforgettable moment, one that would cement their status as true icons of resilience and class. As the interview entered its final stretch, the audience was fully immersed in the magic Keanu and Sandra had created. The earlier tension had dissolved completely, replaced by an atmosphere of warmth and admiration. The host, once the ringleader of the evening, now seemed like a mere spectator in his own show. His attempts to provoke or dominate the conversation had been effectively neutralized by the duo's poise and wisdom. But just when it felt like things couldn't get any better, Sandra decided to take the moment to another level. With a playful glint in her eye, she leaned forward slightly and addressed the host directly. "You know," she began, her tone, light but deliberate, "people often say that talk shows are supposed to be fun. They're meant to bring joy, laughter, and maybe even a little inspiration. So tell me, why do you always seem so determined to stir up trouble instead?" Her question hung in the air, sharp yet delivered with such charm that it drew immediate laughter from the audience. Some viewers clapped enthusiastically, while others shouted their agreement. The host, caught off guard, managed a weak chuckle and mumbled something about keeping things interesting. But his response lacked conviction, and it was clear he was struggling to regain control. Keanu seized the opportunity to amplify Sandra's point. With his trademark calm demeanor, he turned to the camera and spoke directly to the millions watching at home. "I think we all have a choice in how we treat others," he said, his voice steady and resonant. "We can choose kindness over cruelty, understanding over judgment. And tonight I hope what people take away isn't controversy, it's connection." His words struck a chord with the audience, many of whom nodded along or whispered to their neighbors about how powerful his message felt. The applause that followed was thunderous, lasting several seconds before fading into a hushed silence as people leaned in, eager to hear more. Sensing they had the room, and likely the entire viewing audience, in the palm of their hands, Keanu and Sandra continued to share moments of vulnerability and insight. Sandra recounted a story about a particularly challenging time in her career when self-doubt threatened to overwhelm her. "There were days when I wondered if I was good enough," she admitted, her voice tinged with emotion. "But then I realized something important. Success isn't about being perfect. It's about showing up, doing your best, and trusting that you'll grow along the way." Her honesty resonated deeply with the audience, who responded with heartfelt cheers and whistles. Keanu followed up with a reflection on resilience, drawing from his own experiences of loss and hardship. "Life doesn't always go the way you plan," he said softly. "Sometimes it knocks you down. But every challenge is also an opportunity to learn, to adapt, and to become stronger." He paused for a moment, letting his words sink in, before adding with a small smile, "And sometimes it reminds you of the importance of surrounding yourself with good people. People who believe in you even when you don't believe in yourself." The audience erupted into applause again, their cheers filling the studio with an energy that felt almost electric. Even the host, who had spent much of the evening trying to provoke conflict, seemed momentarily moved by the sincerity of their words. For a brief moment, his expression softened, as though he too recognized the profound impact Keanu and Sandra were having, not just on the live audience, but on everyone tuning in. Realizing they had completely flipped the script, Sandra turned to the host with a mischievous grin. "So here's my suggestion," she said, leaning back casually in her seat. "Why don't we make this segment about celebrating positivity? Instead of tearing each other down, let's focus on what brings us together. After all, isn't that what entertainment is supposed to do?" Her proposal drew another wave of applause, with some audience members chanting, Positivity matters. The host, clearly outmatched, could only nod awkwardly and mutter, "Well, sure." Encouraged by the overwhelming support, Keanu chimed in with a thoughtful observation. "Art has this incredible power to unite people," he said, his voice carrying a quiet intensity. "Whether it's through movies, music, or even conversations like this one, it reminds us of our shared humanity. And in a world that often feels divided, that's more important than ever." His words earned yet another standing ovation, with many viewers visibly wiping away tears. The emotional weight of the moment was palpable, transforming the interview into something far greater than anyone had anticipated. By now, the host appeared increasingly flustered, his earlier confidence replaced by a mix of frustration and resignation. Every attempt he made to interject or steer the conversation back toward controversy was met with resistance, not just from Keanu and Sandra, but from the audience as well. At one point, he tried to pivot to a lighthearted topic, asking Sandra about her favorite romantic comedy roles. But rather than indulging him, she used the opportunity to reflect on the importance of storytelling. "Romantic comedies remind us that love exists in all its forms," she said warmly. "They give us hope, laughter, and a reason to believe in happy endings, even when life gets tough." Her response drew yet another round of applause, leaving the host with no choice but to concede defeat. As the segment neared its conclusion, the energy in the room had shifted entirely. What had started as a potentially explosive confrontation had evolved into a celebration of resilience, authenticity, and the power of human connection. The audience, once wary of the host's intentions, now viewed him as little more than a bystander in a moment that belonged entirely to Keanu and Sandra. When the final commercial break rolled around, the studio was buzzing with excitement. Backstage, crew members exchanged knowing glances, aware they had witnessed something extraordinary. Reporters gathered near the exits, eager to capture reactions from the stars as soon as the cameras stopped rolling. Meanwhile, social media platforms lit up with praise for Keanu and Sandra, with hashtags like Grace Under Pressure and Kindness Matters trending worldwide. It was clear that the duo had not only navigated a difficult situation with grace, they had turned it into a defining moment that would be remembered for years to come. As the show prepared to wrap up, the stage was set for one final, unforgettable exchange. One that would leave the audience speechless and solidify Keanu and Sandra's status as true icons of humility and class. As the interview approached its final moments, the audience was on the edge of their seats, fully invested in the magic Keanu and Sandra had created. The earlier tension had been replaced by a sense of unity, as if everyone in the room, and likely millions watching at home, had become part of something much bigger than a standard talk show. The host, who had started the evening with sharp jabs and provocative questions, now seemed like a mere bystander in his own program. His attempts to provoke or dominate the conversation had been skillfully deflected, leaving him overshadowed by the grace and authenticity of his guests. Keanu leaned forward slightly, his calm demeanor radiating wisdom. "You know," he began, addressing both the host and the audience, "there's so much noise in the world today, so many distractions pulling us in different directions. But when we take a step back, we realize that what really matters is connection. It's about finding common ground and lifting each other up." His words resonated deeply, drawing spontaneous applause from the crowd. People nodded along, some whispering to their neighbors about how true his statement felt. Even the host, though visibly flustered, couldn't help but offer a weak smile. Sandra seized the moment, turning to the camera with a warm expression. "And that's why I love what I do," she said, her voice filled with sincerity. "Acting isn't just about pretending to be someone else. It's about telling stories that remind us of our shared humanity. Whether it's through laughter, tears, or even silence, those stories have the power to heal, inspire, and bring people together." Her reflection struck a chord with the audience, many of whom erupted into cheers. Some viewers could be seen wiping away tears, moved by her heartfelt words. The host, sensing he was running out of time to salvage the situation, tried one last attempt to steer the conversation toward controversy. "So, Keanu," he interjected awkwardly, "What's next for you? Any big projects coming up?" It was a safe question, clearly an effort to avoid further embarrassment. But Keanu, ever composed, used the opportunity to reinforce the theme of positivity they had established. "Whatever comes next," he replied with a thoughtful smile. "I hope it brings people joy. At the end of the day, that's what storytelling is all about. Making someone feel seen, heard, or understood." Sandra nodded enthusiastically, adding her own thoughts. "And for me," she said, glancing at the audience, "it's about staying true to myself. If I can make someone laugh, cry, or simply feel less alone, then I've done my job." Her response drew another wave of applause, with some fans chanting her name. The energy in the room was electric, a testament to how profoundly Keanu and Sandra had connected with everyone present. Realizing the segment was nearing its conclusion, the host made one final effort to regain control. "Well, folks," he announced, forcing a grin, "that's all the time we have tonight. Please give it up for Keanu Reeves and Sandra Bullock." He gestured toward them with exaggerated enthusiasm, clearly hoping to wrap things up before losing any more ground. But the audience wasn't ready to let go just yet. They rose to their feet in a standing ovation, clapping and cheering loudly as Keanu and Sandra stood up to acknowledge the overwhelming support. Backstage, reporters swarmed around the duo as soon as the cameras cut off. Microphones were thrust in their faces, eager journalists firing questions about their thoughts on the evening. Sandra shrugged modestly, her smile unwavering. "At the end of the day," she said, "we're all human. We all have bad days, but it's how we respond that defines us." Her comment drew nods of agreement from the press corps, many of whom praised her composure during the challenging interview. Keanu echoed her sentiment, speaking softly, but with conviction. "Sometimes, silence speaks louder than words," he remarked, his expression thoughtful. "And sometimes kindness does too." His statement quickly became a viral quote, shared across social media platforms and celebrated by fans worldwide. Hashtags like "kindness wins" and "grace under pressure" trended for hours, with countless users expressing admiration for how Keanu and Sandra handled the situation. Meanwhile, reactions poured in from celebrities and public figures who had watched the episode unfold. Many took to Twitter and Instagram to praise the duo's poise and authenticity. "Keanu and Sandra didn't just win the interview, they won hearts," wrote one actress. Another actor added, "That's how you handle negativity with class. Inspirational." Fans flooded forums and comment sections, sharing personal stories of how the interview had inspired them to focus on positivity and resilience in their own lives. For the host, however, the aftermath was less favorable. Critics lambasted his aggressive tactics, accusing him of prioritizing shock value over meaningful conversation. Clips of the interview went viral, with many viewers pointing out how Keanu and Sandra's responses highlighted the host's lack of substance. Some called for accountability, urging producers to reconsider the tone of future episodes. Despite his reputation for stirring drama, this particular episode marked a turning point, a clear example of how audiences crave authenticity over conflict. As the night drew to a close, Keanu and Sandra exited the studio side by side, their bond stronger than ever. Reporters captured candid photos of them laughing and chatting as they made their way to their cars. For both actors, the evening had been more than just another appearance on a talk show. It had been an opportunity to showcase their values, connect with their fans, and remind the world of the importance of kindness and humility. In the days that followed, the impact of the interview continued to ripple outward. News outlets published think pieces analyzing the cultural significance of the moment, while late-night comedians joked about the host's failed attempts to rattle Keanu and Sandra. Memes featuring their most memorable quotes circulated widely, cementing their status as icons of grace under pressure. The episode became required viewing for anyone seeking inspiration or guidance on handling adversity with dignity. Ultimately, what started as a potentially disastrous confrontation ended as a triumphant celebration of humanity. Keanu and Sandra had not only navigated the challenges of the evening with unmatched poise, They had transformed it into a powerful reminder of the strength found in vulnerability and compassion. As millions reflected on the interview, one thing was abundantly clear. The legacy of that night would endure far beyond the confines of a single talk show. It was a masterclass in rising above negativity, proving that even in the face of hostility, kindness always prevails.